Yeah, sure.
Welcome back, everybody. Bula Banaka, Talofa Lava, Kia ora koutou. Here we are with myself, Graham Smith, and my colleagues and friends, Saline and Pale. So we've talked about Talanoa, and we've talked about Pacific cultural centeredness a little bit. Today we want to branch out and talk about another concept. This is something that we've dug into a little bit at Aku Aotearoa. There's been different workshops on it, but it's something I've kind of struggled to understand myself. So I'm really hoping I can gain something from this as well, guys. Let's talk about leva. What is leva and why do I need to know it?
Thanks, Graham. So, leva, again, is a Samoan word or saying, or two words, which basically means space. Now, if you take that further, it might mean the sacred space. And then you would say the sacred space between what? And that would lead you to think, right, a sacred space between me and my God, between me and my fellow person, and between me and the land which we work and live in. And so those three spaces are really sacred for all Pacific groups, including Maori, actually. And leva is a term that we use if we want to keep that sacred space. Then we have to think about, gosh, how did we break that space in the first place? Because it would mean that we must have erred. What's another word for that? We might have broken that space by some act or deed or some grief or something. And so how do we restore that? We call that, how do we teo leva? So how do we restore leva? So there are two parts to that, is the teo leva, which we repair, and the soli leva, which would broken that. When we think about our relationship with our creator, that's that sacred space between me and my creator. That's kept sacred by things like my prayer life, my attendance of church meetings, my worship services, the songs I sing, my Christian, if you like, pathway to keep my relationship or my va sacred with my creator. So how that gets erred or grieved is I might feel like I've sinned. So then I have to tell that va by coming back and asking my creator for forgiveness. So there's a real process happening in there for that relationship to stay sacred. My va between myself and my fellow man is basically doing unto others what they do unto you. So the more that you do for one another, then it's that reciprocity thing, then that va or that space is kept sacred. Now, if I abuse that relationship, then of course I need to bring restitution, in which case I might ask for forgiveness if it's my wife or my children or my neighbor, or if it's something on a bigger scale, like we think about the dawn raids that happened in New Zealand. And that was a huge severing of the va between the Pacific Islands and Aotearoa, New Zealand. So an apology was made to try and restore their va back, or tell their va, albeit a little bit staged, but at least it began the process to tell that va or to restore that sacred space. And the last one, the va between myself and the land, that's where that whole thing of climate change comes into it. The more we abuse our land, the more we're severing the va or the space, sacred space between us and our land. And the only way to restore that is to be more responsible how we care about the land and the way we do for climate change. That's kind of like a few in a nutshell.
We started to talk about leva because of lockdown, and so it gave us a context to be able to work from, because when we think about leva, it's really about our relationship. And Pale's already mentioned that leva is our relationship between ourselves and God, ourselves and the land, and ourselves and each other. There's no separation really between professional and personal relationships for Pacific. They're one and the same. And so COVID gave us the context to think about leva as, what is cultural social distancing? What is it that keeps us safe in those relationships with the land, with each other, and in our spirituality? And so, as you know, Pale's already mentioned those three areas. We look at leva as the relationship. Soli leva, the dawn raids gave us a really good example of what breaking that relationship looks like. That means that we've stepped over those boundaries, and soli means that we've stamped on that relationship. Teo leva for us is as Pale said, is the restoration of that relationship. And so we start to look at the dawn raid apology as the restoration of that relationship between ourselves, Pacific, and Aotearoa, the government. So that's the context that we work from with leva.